Thank you so much. It is halfway through the final day, and I think there's a level of exhaustion amongst us now. But we have a really important panel, and one that I'm very, very excited to moderate, on Inside the Battle for Strategic Power with a group of deep tech CEOs. The race for deep tech leadership is no longer just about innovation, it's about influence. With global defense spending nearing $2.7 trillion US dollars, technologies once confined to labs are now shaping the balance of power. Solid-state batteries, quantum computing, advanced AI, autonomous systems aren't simply commercial bets, but they're strategic assets. And I'm pretty sure that all of my panel feels that every day. The CEOs that we have with us today are leading companies that sit at this intersection between frontier science into deployable systems that power economies, industries, and national capabilities. So for today, the question is, how do we create a positive and conducive ecosystem to support and grow deep tech, to support what you do, while managing the constraints that come from the fact that you are working in what is now a strategic industry. We have four phenomenal speakers. On my immediate left, Dr. Siyu Huang, the CEO and co-founder of Factorial Energy, which is about solid-state batteries. Next to her, Dr. Subodh Kulkarni, the president and CEO of Rigetti Computing, which is a quantum computing company. Samir Menon, the co-founder and CEO of Dexterity, which is around industrial automation and AI. And then finally, AJ Abdalat, founder and CEO of Beyond Limits, an AI company. So, Siyu, let me come to you first. In an earlier exchange we were having, you said every challenge has two sides. We need to spot the opportunity within the constraint. So, what are the opportunities that you see within the constraints that are created by rising geopolitical power tensions?
I would say in the US, battery is a very rare commodity here because right now, 90% of US military and defense applications are using batteries from China. Mm-hmm. And as of 2 weeks ago, China announced this across-the-board export control ban for all of the batteries exporting outside of China, especially for high energy density batteries over 300 watt-hour per kilogram. And this is a startling commencement of the new era of the vacuum and also competition. However, this created a very special opportunity for us because we're proud to be a leading US maker and a US leader in batteries. We're backed by Mercedes, Stellantis, Hyundai, and Kia, and they all have broad presence in the US in automotive, but also in energy storage and various other applications. And for us, for our initial focus is really on drone and various applications, but we think this created a very unprecedented opportunity for suppliers in the US.
So it expands your market, but what about your supply chain?
Yeah, that's definitely very important. Like we build the resilience through localization and diversification. So supply chain is definitely a very important topic. We currently have collaborations among multiple parties, like with Korea, that we actually have 3 investors and partners. We announced a partnership with LG Chem earlier this year. And we also had a strong investment from Lotte Chemical, which is another chemical player in the space, as well as a few other like Japanese and Korean partners that really diversified upstream. And downstream, we announced a recycling partnership with Sungil High-Tech, which is a conglomerate in Korea to do recycling for the battery from cradle to grave.
Kind of circular economy, effectively.
Yes.
Fantastic, and I'm sure we'll come back to this theme. Subodh, your business is, as I understand it, kind of is centered on quantum computing.
Correct.
Can you just say one word about what it is you do and how that is impacting, or how you think that in the future is going to impact the kind of geopolitical or the power politics?
Quantum computing is by definition of deep tech.
Yeah.
Extremely exciting disruptive technology with tremendous ramifications. We can solve problems that have not been solved before, or we can take problems that are being solved but do them much faster. We are talking 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 times faster at a fractional energy consumption. So it's got tremendous computing power, also tremendous lower energy consumption, both at the same time. But just with any complicated technology, there are both rewards and some serious concerns. Rewards, of course, you can do all these things, exciting drug development and financial forecasting, weather forecasting, all those things. But the risk is quantum computing can also easily break encryption. And that's the reason national security is at stake here. So in the next 5 to 10 years, and timelines vary because we are doing development right now, quantum computers could break AES encryption, and that can lead to havoc, frankly. I don't think the world is ready for it. I don't think the governments are ready for it. I don't think most of us understand what it means. I mean, literally, we could wake up a day and we find everything is dark around us, and your bank is gone, your brokerage is gone, no light, no water, back to the basics, and that we call Q-Day. And we are literally talking 5 to 10 years from now that could happen, and I don't think many governments and many people are even fathoming that could happen. So there's some serious stakes going on right now, and it's going to be exciting to see how quantum computing comes along.
Exciting and scary. And I want to come back to this theme of what is it you want from governments, but what is the kind of pressure you're under from governments, right, as you do this innovation. But Samir, let me come to you. And by the way, I should say, I'm going to come to the audience very quickly for questions, because this is so much more fun for everybody up here, and I think for you as well, if you get to engage in the conversation. So please, if the things you want to ask about, start thinking about it, because I am going to come to you fairly quickly. But before I do, Samir, let me come to you. Dexterity's robotics platforms operate across logistics and industrial automation, as I understand. I've done my homework. As that autonomy expands into the kind of defense and security domains, what are you seeing? Are you beginning to yet see governments put in place guardrails, or what are the guardrails that you're anticipating seeing?
I would say physical AI is a broad umbrella of efforts that are related to taking AI technologies and applying them to physical systems like robots. It's a relatively new area which is developing very rapidly. When we look at the applications in front of us that are imminent, and by imminent I would say on a 5-year horizon, those applications all center around robots playing an assistive role to supercharge people, amplify our capabilities to do stressful, laborious, repetitive grunt work. I think there are longer-term applications in defense, which might come along that more hardware-focused. It's a bit early for us to say exactly how it's going to play out, but where we do see a lot of activity is that the wars of the future and the conflicts of the future are going to be dictated more by how resilient our supply chains are, by how efficient we are at creating the goods and the weapons that go out. And at the end of the day, wars are probably going to be fought by robots. So how do we become efficient at that?
One of the the kind of stories, if you will, of World War II in particular was American manufacturing companies very, very quickly changing their production lines, right, to start building planes and other defense mechanisms. Or how is that story going to change if there's a next time round? How is that story going to change with the kind of things that you're creating?
Yeah, there's two stories over here. One is, of course, how do we make ourselves way more productive and efficient than we are? The backdrop to this is when we look at most of the global powers today, they all have economies with an aging, declining population. Mm-hmm. So we're all getting older, we're having fewer kids, there's fewer people to do the work, and the kids are far more obsessed with watching YouTube and TikTok than getting their hands dirty. Yeah. So I think robotics is an inevitability. It can become the backbone of a national security initiative, and I think everyone should be invested in it. That being said, the robots aren't going to be like your Terminator, fighting with lasers. They're going to be just helping you make your economy much more resilient.
You say that, but I was reading something just this week where somebody was, and I can't remember, I think it was an American businessman who was saying that is the future of warfare, right? So Possibly, maybe,
You never
maybe
know.
not, right?
You never know.
AJ, let me just come to you. We've spent a lot of time talking about AI over the last three days. What's missing in the AI race? You know, what is it that we're not talking about?
I think we're seeing significant progress in AI. You know, we saw significant enhancement in machine learning, deep learning in the last couple of decades, in the last 40 years in generative intelligence. I think what's important right now is really explainability and trust. Beyond Limits as a company came from the legacy of NASA. NASA will not deploy any asset in space if you cannot explain how you arrived at the answer and provide an audit trail. So that was built into the technology. And we were talking about dual use technology. We're finding out actually, when you're deploying this in the commercial arena, people, when they basically see how AI arrived at the answer and they look at the audit trail, it provides explainability, they're willing to embrace it. So it's creating a trust between workers and AI. And I truly believe, this is maybe a biased opinion, that the future of intelligence is going to be through collaboration between the human race and AI system. So it is very important to build that trust. So explainability and audit trail will be very important.
Can I, particularly for the two of you, but I welcome your thoughts as well. I mean, one of the things that I keep hearing about is that China, they are using AI to do practical things, right? They are integrating AI into industry. In the United States, it's all about AGI, right? And two totally different races going on. And that has strategic consequence. So I'd love to hear from all of you, but particularly the two of you at the end who are doing AI, which is the race that we should be running, right?
If I may, I believe AGI is obviously the holy grail, okay? We're not there yet, but I think it's coming soon, especially with development with like quantum computing. I think the advancement AI with quantum computing is going to get us there. We used to talk about AGI maybe around 2050. I actually think it's a lot sooner than that. But what's important, again, I want to emphasize, making sure that human is in the loop. And again, I apologize for being redundant. Collaboration between the human race, AI system, building explainability, creating the trust is going to be very important.
Maybe I can add something to it. I mean, there's a race going on to get to AGI, and it's harder with the current versions of LLMs that we are dealing with. So if you look at ChatGPT 5, was better than ChatGPT 4, but we couldn't justify the amount of extra development we had to do to get that incremental result. One of the interesting papers that came out a couple months ago from Google, actually, and we are replicating those results, is that with a quantum computer, fundamentally quantum computer is like a human brain. Okay, in fact, there are people who have said, nature has given us a perfect quantum computer, it's the human brain. All we are trying to do is build a machine that gets close to it. And Google demonstrated that a quantum computer plus Gen AI may be a faster path to get to AGI, and the timelines are indeed 4 or 5 years from now. So we are talking very soon, we may have a quantum computer and Gen AI that starts coming very, very close to AGI type human intelligence. Some exciting stuff going on there.
I'll take a counter position.
Yeah.
Please.
We should do the practical stuff. It's way more important.
Well, this is it. I mean, I've got 4 entrepreneurs, all based in the United States, who are, I mean, you haven't commented, but there's a lean, if you will, to the American way of looking at it. But no, fantastic.
And I agree. I think like when it comes to the future of the defense and national security, yes, you can have a lot of cloud computing and all the stuff, but you need to have someone on the ground to really execute it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's where coming to the drones, the airplanes, the aerospace, the Marines. Those are the hardwares. You need to be automated, and you need to have the physical system to deploy it.
Absolutely.
One of the other themes that has come out over many of the conversations I've participated in is the role of talent, is the role of people. And I think what I'm hearing is there's a role for technology, but not in the absence of people and trust. I want to ask one more question up here, and then I'm going to start looking. Don't get me wrong. I have more questions than I can than I can cover in the half hour we've got, but I want to make sure you will have a voice. What is are you yet, again, you're four businesses based in the United States, are you yet, how is your relationship with government been changing, and how do you think it's going to change over the next, say, 5 years, over the time horizon that we've been talking? And I'd love you to answer the question both in terms of what they're asking of you, but also what you're asking of them, right?
Yeah, mostly government has been a very supportive role in the U.S. to support like those technologies that's critical for national security. But I would say I would love for them to be more collaborative to the commercial deployment, because currently there are a lot of constraints coming to technologies when it comes to the defense applications. And that's why we've even had like big defense contract manufacturers told us, like, if you wanted to deploy something commercially, don't go to defense. That should be the last market you're tapping into. And that's why you also see a lot of US defense companies, not to talk about those like dinosaurs, right? For the big ones and the new ones coming up. And usually they're very small. They're very small in size because they're just being burdened by so much overhead you have to wear with the IT. Like I had a company, they have like 4 people just working in the IT. They have 200 people in total just working on the IT security. And that's going to be a huge burden for the company to grow, even hire talents globally. So I think that's something I do wish the US government could develop a little bit more embracive culture around this and make sure like it's also good for them, right? We don't want the government to have the latest, the oldest technology, but also the latest technology as well. So I think that's going to be a mutually beneficial path, which is also the government want us to do, is to bring them the latest technology, like what we just announced with Mercedes, the record drive, 1,205 kilometer drive, and with the EV, and they wanted to have that technology. But if they can't, you have to put all the string attached to it, then they have to be the last market to receive it.
So your advice is go to defense, despite the huge amount of money that's coming into defense, leave the defense till later, because if you go early, you're going to be constrained. What else are you
That's good advice. And just to follow it up, taking the more practical position, I would say you can build a mountain one brick at a time or one rock at a time. And there's a fundamental desire to move fast in startups, which is best matched moving to the commercial economy, which also moves fast. If you have companies that are operating on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, they have a sense of urgency versus government institutions usually work on at least years. So there's many advantages to keeping that startup spark alive. With AI in particular, there are so many opportunities where you can take something into production that is maybe at a 90-95% capability, drive actual value in the world, and bootstrap the creation of a much more general technology, which is where I think companies can really scale. Defense requires much higher degree of reliability, robustness.
Okay, so
it comes later.
Yeah, it comes later because you need 100% or
99.9 something. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we're noticing a big shift in the US. If you look at the last like 6 decades, we saw technology development and innovation coming out of DoD through their sponsored ecosystem, universities,
DARPA.
national labs. I actually seeing a new trend right now where startups are becoming to generate new innovation, and I'm very encouraged and finding very refreshing that actually I think the US government, for example, is adapting to that change. One example is the Army Future Command. They're set up in the University of Austin. It's like a Silicon Valley startup. They're allowing startup company to basically come up with new ideas through broad agency announcement. It's a very refreshing, it's a good step. So we're seeing startup company now come up with innovation that the government will adopt.
Okay, so it's kind of a reverse.
In quantum computing, government plays a very critical role right now because of the national security interests. And the US government, like many other governments, has a huge stake in quantum computing. Most of the funding so far has come from the government. We encourage them as much as we can because there's a race, frankly, there's a race going on between US and China right now in quantum computing. And the fear is that whoever comes up with a capable quantum computer first has a huge advantage, not for just 10 or 20 years, but probably a century or so. So stakes are fairly high. Most people right up to the president understand it. So I have personally been in many committees, subcommittees to give advice. Having said that, I mean, right now the government is shut down. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the US government and many other governments. So they need to move faster. The example I gave them is semiconductor industry developed because of one company and one government customer, Fairchild and NASA. It was awful technology, very error-prone technology in the 1950s and 60s. But the US government single-handedly nurtured semiconductor industry in its early days to become now what is a multi-trillion-dollar industry that we all use. Quantum computing is going through a similar phase right now. We need governments, not just the US government, to hold hand, take us through this current decade or so before it takes off.
So it's interesting. I'm hearing very different messaging across the panel. It kind of, I guess, it depends on your industry, right? Quantum computing, high capital intensity.
Absolutely.
Kind of maybe a longer time horizon. It lends itself more to government. Whereas if you want to move fast, you have to think in a different way. Let me come to the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? As I say, I've got plenty of questions myself, but I do want the audience to have an opportunity to ask. So I'm going to go to this lady here, and then I'm going to pick up this gentleman, and I'm going to come to this gentleman. So this lady here, she's got a hand up right behind you. Perfect. If you can just say who you are, give us your name, give us your company, and then ask the question, so that it's always nice to know who we're answering. Go ahead.
Sure. My name is Ying Li with Emma Capital. I'm a venture capitalist. I'm curious to get your opinion on what are the biggest challenges or technical barriers that we need to cross before those deep tech can be, used in a wider scale for, solid-state battery, quantum, and robotics and AI.
Okay.
I'll say what we find out, there is an opportunity, as I mentioned, working as a direct contract manufacturer is very cumbersome with the US government, but if you're working as a tier 2, right, that could be an opportunity for you you don't have to carry all the overhead as you need it to be, but we can supply to drones, to submarine companies, and they can contract with the government directly. So I would say that's an opportunity. We see definitely it potentially can come in even before automotive and some of the energy storage application adoptions.
So in quantum computing, I mean, there are a lot of challenges right now. So one of the main challenges we as a collective industry deal with is errors that we get. So our quantum states don't stay in that state for long. We call decoherence. They come back to natural state in 50, 100 microseconds, and that's too short a time period. So the entire industry's focus is to give error-free quantum computers if we can. And we call it a quantum advantage and fault-tolerant quantum computing. So there are a couple milestones that we track in the industry. None of us are at that quantum advantage right now. That's why you don't see quantum computers in any data centers today. Today, they are not superior than CPU or GPU technology. The potential is there. That's why all the investment and everything. But we are still 3 to 5 years from that first milestone where we can demonstrate practical benefits with quantum computing. So lots of challenges, technically speaking, to get to that point right now.
Physical AI is quite interesting. I would say one of the important milestones in physical AI was just crossed within the past 18 months, at least for us, probably for a few other folks, which is robots today can actually do a better job than people at many stressful, heavy lifting applications that are the backbone of our economy. Where the key challenges have shifted today is we've started to see growth, we've started to see revenues ramp, we started to see mass deployments kick off. Large customers are adopting. Amazon recently announced that it actually has more robot employees than human employees have deployed their millionth or so robot. With physical AI, it's taking off, basically. The challenges today are being capital efficient, making sure that you're marshaling your resources. It's a massive field. I mean, digital AI is huge. Physical AI is 10 times potential larger impact. And you can very easily get distracted because there are applications in consumer, there are applications in industrials, there are applications in enterprises. So I would say the challenge is taking capital, deploying it efficiently, and keeping high focus in a way that drives extreme commercial value. And that becomes very, very challenging, collecting the right amounts of data to scale yourself. And it really comes down to, can you build general purpose AI that can serve as a robot brain, where the same robot brain drives a wide variety of different robots, where the same robot brain supports many, many different applications, Can you do that cost effectively and safely?
I think they're not technology challenges. We're working on a lot of exciting stuff out there that are game changers for the world, addressing some of the most serious challenges. The issue, you're a VC, we need patient capital. Deep tech is not like SaaS or software. The capital needs to be patient to make sure that we can basically commercialize deep tech approaches. And I feel actually very pleasantly surprised that we were beginning to see private equity get involved in funding deep tech. So just patient capital to allow deep tech to basically address some serious problems out there.
Patient capital. This gentleman here.
Thank you. My question to
Who
Mr.
are
AG, Ayub, I work for a financial investor in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you.
My question to AJ, Ms. Wickett gave an interesting taxonomy on how the structure of the AI in the US versus in China, how China is more focused towards its application and all that. I'm keen to understand your perspective when it comes to the quantum race, USA versus China. How is this, who's leading that particular domain, if I may?
Well, I'm not a quantum guy, I'm an AI guy, but I'll give you my perspectives very quickly. What is exciting about quantum, we've talked about AGI, and I know we have basically different opinions on that. I honestly think quantum is also very near, okay? I think we're beginning to see some capabilities demonstrated in the field. It's not mature yet to the point, but it's getting there. I'm excited about the potential convergence of AI and quantum. I think this is going to be a game changer, and truly it's going to be the gateway to AGI, and it's going to be very exciting.
Okay, Subodh, come on.
So yeah,
Thank you,
we
AJ.
obviously track where China is in quantum computing the best we can. Unfortunately for us, China has become very secretive in the last 2 or 3 years when it comes to quantum computing. They hardly publish any papers or patents. They come to conferences, but they don't give any talks or anything. So we are kind of left guessing as to what exactly the status of quantum computing is in China. Chinese Academy of Sciences, where most of the work happens outside Beijing, supposedly has more than 20,000 people working on quantum computing right now. That's an order of magnitude, probably more people than what we have in the US right now. So there's a lot of concern amongst us in the US that China is at least putting a lot of resources, and they very well may be ahead. We just don't know. And that's the risk we are all taking right now, is if indeed somebody comes up with a capable quantum computer before we can to protect ourselves, and if it gets used for a negative purpose like hacking, what are we going to face? So there's some serious ramifications here.
There are so many echoes in history in what you're talking about, kind of the nuclear race, you know, incredible echoes in that space. But there's also an echo of the alternative, which is scientists across borders talking to one another, right? And somehow that's where the innovation, if you think about COVID vaccines, right? I mean, that was a lot of exchange, even though that was a strategic instrument in many respects. So, I mean, I think there's something in history there, but it's saddening to hear that you can't have those conversations anymore.
Well, I mean, on the
Informally.
between, except for China, I think there's open dialogue going on
Yeah.
amongst most researchers, among most countries. So that's the good part. I mean, and that it's an interesting case study where a single monolithic entity like the government of China funding a quantum computing program versus a classic capitalistic system of many startups like Rigetti Computing, but also companies like Google and IBM, and the innovative spirit that generates, which model is going to work out. And we'll get the answer in the next 5 to 10 years. Of course, we are hoping our capitalistic model works out, but there's always a risk that the single monolithic model may be more suitable for something as big as quantum computing.
Great conversation. I'd love to keep going, but this gentleman had a question.
Thank you. My name is Asif. I work for the Ministry of Communication in Saudi. My question is to Dr. Kulkarni on the quantum. So we have seen today a different story. And some companies, even in quantum, have publicly listed, and some of them are still too early. I mean, we are hearing a mixed news kind of. Some say we're very close, 100 qubit, 200 qubits. Others say we're still far. And kind of back to what AJ mentioned is that maybe there is no patient capital. We're just being pushed and just going through. And I have seen like the reverse SPAC and people going listed, and still there is no use cases. So I'm still curious, where are we really in terms of the quantum computer, and who is doing what? Where are we in terms of the commercialization?
I know we don't have that much time to go over all the details, but Rigetti is a public company. We are traded on NASDAQ. Our market cap is more than $12 billion right now. So we are one of those fortunate companies. We are sitting on $600 million cash, no debt. So we are one of the well-funded companies. But institutional investors have started taking positions in quantum computing companies. So even small companies, we are one of the mid-sized companies, about 200 people kind of company. But small startups are getting money from private capital, venture capital, and it's getting funding from those entities. Government is where the challenge is, as I discussed earlier. But to your question, our view, and you're right, there are various views. There are some companies that are saying quantum's already here. Then you see Jensen Huang making a comment like quantum will be in 30 years, and there's all kinds of shades of gray in between. Our view is that we are about 3 to 5 years from commercial quantum computers for practical applications in data centers. But that's not encryption kind of stuff. For that, you need a bigger, like a few thousand qubit quantum computer. We think we are about 8 to 10 years away from those kinds of applications.
With the final few minutes that we have to us, I want to ask each of you the same question, which is, and I'm going to use a 5-year time horizon, right? Because that's the one everybody seems to be. In 5 years, what is the single breakthrough in your space that you think is going to completely transform and accelerate your industry space? Is it a breakthrough in commerciality? Is it a breakthrough in policy? What is it? So briefly, because we've only got about 3 minutes.
So our space is really about solid-state battery. That's the world has been betting on.
So what is the breakthrough you anticipate?
It's about the commercialization into various industries. We'll start with the drone and some of this marine industry, and then we'll get into EV and get into the energy storage. That's the one going to transform the entire, especially from the mass market to the premium market segment. And it's not only driven by US, but also like all the top 10 OEMs in Europe and US, as well as China. That's also unilaterally the vision that the world is driving to adopt this new technology.
Is the expansion into new industry spaces.
Right, China recently announced that the last 30 years, they bet on lithium ion, and that's not right now a $300 billion industry. For the next 30 years, they wanted to bet on solid state. So that's the next $300 billion industry for them.
Thank you.
I touched on it earlier. I mean, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will get to that quantum advantage point where we can show superiority with quantum computing for practical applications. But the big one is the AGI that AJ and I both touched on. I believe that in the next 5 years, combination of quantum computing with classical computing could potentially get us to AGI, and excitement but challenges that come with it. We need to figure out how to deal with it right now.
Samir.
I would say physical AI has just kicked off. The critical point actually was crossed within the past year. So where we are today, it's time to ramp. It's time to go. We need robots all around us. There's so many people here. I hope 5 years from now this conference happens and there's a good amount of robots. Another few years after that, there's at least half of them are robots, and getting all of our job done. I need my laptop. I just send a little message on my app, goes running, gets my laptop. So I think it's time to scale, basically.
Okay, it's scaling.
Robots everywhere.
AJ.
I'm going to take a different point of view. I think the next breakthrough is not about technology. It's about the dynamics between the human race and technology. How we adapt to robots, how we adapt to AI. Truly, that's going to be the next breakthrough. How we, as a human race, can integrate, for the first time in history, we actually have another species, if you can call AI species here, that is smarter than the human race. The dynamics, the relationship, that's going to be the next breakthrough.
I hope we're able to change that fast, because our biology isn't, right?
Yes.
Thank you all. What I find interesting about this last question is we as humans, again, talking about biology, right? The way our brains work is to think in straight lines. And what you've told us is we need to stop thinking in straight lines, because that's not the direction of travel. Will you all join me in thanking our panel for a great conversation about deep tech and strategic interests? Thank you.